Julie Manugg was born on July 19, 1982, in the quaint town of Goshen, New York. She was raised by her devoted parents, Gerald J. Manugg and Sandra Barish Dopper, alongside her two siblings, Allison Barati Corcoran and Peter Gerald Manugg. Growing up, Julie excelled in her studies, attending the respected Monroe-Woodbury schools before graduating from Monroe-Woodbury High School. She continued her education at Orange County Community College, broadening her knowledge and embracing new opportunities. After completing college, Julie worked as a dedicated medical assistant at Connecticut Coastal Obstetrics and Gynecology, while also finding fulfillment in many other areas of her life. She maintained an active lifestyle, often running and walking to stay energized. Above all, she was deeply devoted to her two sons, Nicholas Keith Turner and Sean Michael Turner, who were the center of her world. Details about her marriage and husband remain unclear. As a single mother, Julie's love and commitment were evident in the strong bond she shared with her children. In 2017, she found love again and began a relationship with Ewan Anthony DeWitt of Roxbury. The couple welcomed a son, Luke Anthony Minogue, in 2019. However, over time, challenges surfaced in their relationship, ultimately leading Julie to part ways with Ewan in 2021. She relocated with her sons to a condominium on Salem Walk in Milford, keeping their well-being at the forefront of her life. By 2022, her eldest son, Nicholas, was 21 and had honorably served in the Coast Guard. Sean, 17 at the time, was a spirited high school senior, thriving both personally and academically. Her youngest son, Luke, whom she shared with Ewan, was 3 years old and brought constant joy to their home. At 40, Julie appeared to be building a stable and fulfilling life with her 3 boys. But tragedy was imminent. Late on the night of December 6, 2022, 17-year-old Nicholas Minogue was jolted awake by piercing screams. At first, he stirred but did not fully wake, brushing off the sound as distant noise from the neighborhood. But the screams intensified, becoming sharper and more desperate, and Nicholas quickly realized something was terribly wrong. Fearing for his mother's safety, he rushed downstairs. In the dim light, he was confronted with a horrifying sight. A man holding an axe and his mother lying on the floor, covered in blood. Amid the chaos, Nicholas heard the chilling words, "You didn't believe me," echoing around him. Overcome with fear, he sprinted back upstairs and locked himself in a room, desperate to protect himself. He immediately called 911, frantically describing the terrifying scene he had just witnessed. To further secure the door, he pushed a heavy chair against it, creating a makeshift barricade. With his heart racing, he pushed open his window and cried out for help. Police arrived within minutes and made their way inside, but overwhelmed by fear, the teenager jumped from the window. As he landed, he heard officers from the Milford Police Department shouting, and he realized it was law enforcement, not the intruder. Authorities soon located the shaken teen and brought him to safety. Inside the home, officers made a heartbreaking discovery. In the kitchen, Julie Manugg was found lying in a pool of blood. She had suffered multiple deep wounds to her face and skull. Nearby, officers noticed a large axe resting on the stove, grim evidence of the brutal attack. In the living room, 3-year-old Luke sat motionless on the couch, stunned and silent. He neither cried nor spoke, appearing completely frozen in shock. An officer remained with him, offering reassurance and comfort until more personnel arrived. After the tragedy, Julie's body was transported to the Connecticut office of the Chief Medical Examiner for a detailed examination. The autopsy later concluded that she died from multiple chop wounds and blunt force injuries to her head, torso, and limbs. The autopsy's detailed findings offered critical insight into the brutality of the attack, helping investigators better understand the circumstances of her tragic death. Police secured the axe recovered from the stove and thoroughly processed it as evidence. Determined to identify the perpetrator, officers carefully examined the surrounding area for anything that might advance the investigation. Inside the home, they conducted a comprehensive search, methodically inspecting each room for clues connected to the crime. The disturbance soon drew concerned neighbors to the scene, and a tense atmosphere settled over the community as residents gathered nearby, anxious to assist authorities in any way possible. As neighbors gathered, one resident stepped forward with unexpected but valuable evidence. Ring camera footage from outside his home at Long Meadow Complex. Officers quickly reviewed the recording, hoping it would reveal something significant. In the footage, they saw a disturbing image, an individual walking with an axe, matching the description Nicholas had given. The sight energized investigators, who recognized they might finally have a strong lead. They immediately began working to identify the man captured on camera. Later that same day, December 6, 2022, the case took a dramatic turn. A distressed woman contacted police, her voice shaking as she relayed a horrifying confession from her son. She told authorities that he had just called her and admitted to killing his girlfriend. The urgency in her words prompted an immediate response from law enforcement. Determined to unravel the truth, they swiftly tracked down the woman and engaged her in conversation. It was then revealed that the man responsible for this ominous confession was none other than Ewan DeWitt, the 42-year-old man who was once in a relationship with Julie. With this vital information in hand, the police dialed Ewan's number, hoping to engage him in a crucial conversation. However, their efforts were met with resistance as Ewan abruptly hung up the call. So it was important for the police to look into Ewan's history, which they believed could provide them the vital information needed to proceed further. Born in the town of Roxbury in 1979, Ewan Anthony DeWitt possessed a diverse range of interests and pursuits. As a talented athlete, he pursued his passion for ice hockey and even reached the level of playing semi-professionally. Ewan's thirst for knowledge led him to obtain a bachelor's degree in history from Siena College, showcasing his intellectual curiosity. He was not a person who would be satisfied with a single vocation, so he also embarked on the journey to become a firefighter. Additionally, Ewan also shared his expertise as a personal trainer. In 2006, Ewan was arrested in Connecticut for driving under the influence and traffic offenses. He pleaded guilty, resulting in a suspended prison sentence and probation. After this, Ewan DeWitt's journey took an inspiring turn when he joined the prestigious ranks of the U.S. Marine Corps in 2009, where he embarked on a path as a skilled weapons specialist and non-commissioned officer. He served his country for 5 years and attained the rank of Lance Corporal in 2011. In a remarkable photo from his time in the Marines, Lance Corporal Ewan DeWitt is seen in action as a machine gunner. The picture shows him courageously operating a powerful M250 caliber machine gun on a vehicle during an important defense of the Amphibious Task Force naval exercise. The event took place on December 3, 2011, aboard the USS Chima. With his leadership qualities and expertise, he assumed the role of a machine gun section leader in the esteemed 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. He dedicated himself to his duties, serving multiple tours in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and other classified locations with his dedicated brothers. Ewan and his brothers' inspiring story was captured in a 2015 article in the Register Citizen highlighting their collective efforts to restore a piece of history. Ewan's life took a darker turn when he faced legal trouble. In November 2019, the Milford police arrested him for assaulting a victim, which resulted in a protective order being issued by the court. The case remains unresolved, as court records revealed that it was still pending. With his next court date scheduled for April 14, 2023, Ewan maintained his innocence by pleading not guilty. He was released on a $20,000 bond, awaiting the judicial process to unfold. Ewan's troubled past included a disturbing incident in which he was arrested for his actions towards Julie shortly after the birth of her son. Reports stated that he had thrown a large object at Julie Manugg and had also destroyed her phone to prevent her from calling for help. Fearing for her safety, Julie sought refuge at a neighbor's house and contacted the authorities. The incident highlighted the alarming nature of Ewan's behavior and its impact on those around him, adding another layer of intensity to the unfolding events. In 2021, he faced charges of assaulting emergency personnel and a female in Wake County, North Carolina. Court records indicated that he pled guilty and received a combined jail sentence of 95 days, although the exact duration of his incarceration remained unknown. These encounters with the law showcased a pattern of concerning behavior, raising further questions about Ewan's character and past actions. Behind Ewan's troubled history, a darker pattern of violence emerged, specifically targeting Julie Manugg. Several protective orders were filed against Ewan due to previous instances of domestic violence. These orders were issued in November 2019 and January 2021 and were put in place to safeguard not only Julie, but also the children who were present during those incidents. One such incident involved Ewan being intoxicated and engaging in a heated argument with Julie. According to a statement provided by the victim's son, Ewan had thrown a playpen at Julie's head, which resulted in a distressing injury. While Ewan was in rehabilitation, Julie took steps to file a restraining order, seeking protection from his harmful actions. Despite this, Ewan was granted visitation rights, which left a lingering sense of unease and concern about the safety of those involved. In addition to their troubled relationship, Julie and Ewan DeWitt found themselves entangled in family court cases beginning in 2021. It all began when Julie filed a petition for child support for their son Luke in August 2021. In October 2021, a judge ruled in her favor and ordered Ewan to provide financial support. As tensions continued to escalate, Ewan took Julie to court in December 2021, seeking resolution regarding visitation rights. The court intervened and granted supervised visitation for Ewan in April 2022, with a scheduled hearing in April 2023 to further address the matter. These legal battles shed light on the complexities and challenges faced by Julie and Ewan as they navigated their post-relationship dynamics. As the investigation progressed, new details were revealed that on November 14, 2022, just 3 weeks before her death, Julie took a decisive step by visiting the Milford Police Department to file a complaint against Ewan. She alleged that he bombarded her with over 200 text messages within a span of just 2 days, despite the existence of a protective order that explicitly forbade him from contacting her. Officer Scott Nablin listened to Julie's concerns and diligently collected evidence of the text messages from her phone, further solidifying the case against Ewan. In a heartfelt plea for protection, Julie Manugg expressed her deep concern for her safety and the well-being of her children in a sworn affidavit submitted on November 17, 2022. Determined to put an end to the ongoing abuse, she stated, "I don't believe I should endure this mistreatment any longer." Fearful of the consequences, she detailed the relentless harassment she faced. Julie Manugg also wrote in the document that, "Ewan has got himself into a lot of trouble with drugs and alcohol, and I'm scared he's going to kill me." Officer Nablin, resolute in his pursuit of justice, meticulously crafted an arrest warrant, alleging Ewan's violation of the protective order. The document, filled with crucial details, was reviewed by a supervisor, ensuring its accuracy and validity. They made sure that the arrest warrant application contained the requisite probable cause to support the charge that the text messages sent by Ewan DeWitt violated the modified protective order that was issued on January 15, 2021. On November 21, 2022, the court reviewed the warrant application and it made its way to the Milford State's Attorney's Office. However, the story took an unexpected turn as the Assistant State's Attorney, committed to thoroughness, sent the warrant application back to Officer Nablin and requested further information before proceeding. In this delicate dance between law and justice, every step forward demanded meticulous attention to detail. However, on December 1, 2022, Julie Manugg successfully obtained a civil restraining order from a judge. In the hearing, which lasted about an hour, Julie presented evidence of the text messages, Ewan's struggles with substance abuse, mental health issues, and a history of violence. She expressed concern for Ewan's well-being, describing his bipolar rage and erratic behavior, and emphasized the importance of him receiving proper treatment and therapy. Julie firmly believed that Ewan should not be allowed around anyone until he had received the necessary help and support. Recognizing the imminent danger she faced, a no-contact restraining order was swiftly issued on December 1, 2022, providing a legal shield against any further interaction with Ewan. This order took a darker turn when, 5 days later, Ewan killed Julie with an axe in her condo. Now, all the evidence indicated that Ewan was the main focus of the investigation, and the search for him intensified as the police tirelessly canvassed the area around the Salem Walk condominium, leaving no stone unturned. Their efforts led them to a dive bar on Ocean Avenue in West Haven, where they sought the assistance of the local community. They approached patrons, informing them about the ongoing investigation and urging them to notify the authorities if they spotted Ewan DeWitt. It was during this concerted effort that two observant individuals caught sight of a person who matched the suspect's description. Eager to aid the investigation, they immediately flagged down the police, providing crucial information about the suspect's whereabouts. Engaging with one of the witnesses, who preferred to remain anonymous, police learned that the individual had witnessed someone resembling the suspect wandering around the parking lot for a brief period. Eventually, the suspect entered a food truck located in the parking lot. Acting swiftly, the police converged on the scene. Without incident, they apprehended Ewan DeWitt on December 6, 2022, bringing him into custody and moving one step closer to uncovering the truth. The police initiated a rigorous interrogation of Ewan in the early hours of December 6, 2022. Initially, Ewan maintained a stoic silence, withholding vital information. However, after hours of intense questioning, a breakthrough occurred. Ewan finally confessed to the gruesome act of taking Julie's life with an axe. He revealed that he had silently entered the house through the kitchen window, concealing himself in anticipation of his victim's arrival. When Julie eventually entered the kitchen, he launched an attack, wielding the axe with deadly intent. It was during this horrifying moment that Nicholas, Julie's son, descended the stairs and confronted the scene. Overwhelmed with fear, Ewan fled, leaving the axe behind on the gas stove. Ewan's admission sent shockwaves through the investigation, bringing forth a chilling account of the tragic events that unfolded that night. During Ewan's initial court appearance in State Superior Court in Milford on December 7, 2022, Assistant State Attorney Alana Paul informed the judge about new developments in the case. She revealed that Ewan had fully admitted to the incident, but even without that admission, she believed the evidence against him was substantial. Attorney Paul highlighted the presence of surveillance footage and the testimony of Julie's son, who had observed part of the incident. Given the seriousness of the case, Paul argued that a significant bond was necessary. Emphasizing the gravity of the situation, Judge Arden Groggins set his bond at $5 million. The judge expressed concerns about Ewan's history of disregarding court orders and emphasized the importance of public safety. In light of the circumstances, Ewan was placed on suicide watch with a hearing scheduled for December 14, 2022 to further address the case. Finally, it was the day of the final decision. On December 14, 2022, in addition to the murder charge, Ewan DeWitt faced multiple other charges brought forth by the Milford police. These included criminal violation of a protective order, criminal violation of a restraining order, risk of injury to a minor, and reckless endangerment. By levying these charges, law enforcement sought to address the broader scope of Ewan's alleged actions and their impact. A hearing was scheduled for Ewan's pending criminal cases on April 6, 2023. He has yet to plead. Prosecutors stated that Ewan already confessed to the murder of Julie Manugg. However, no further information has been released by the police about the hearing. In the statement, the family expressed their determination to take action and ensure that those who neglected their responsibilities are held accountable. They also expressed their hope that this case would serve as a catalyst for improved protections for individuals facing domestic violence and abuse. With their unwavering commitment, the family aims to bring about positive changes and prevent such tragic incidents from occurring in the future. This case involved a combination of diligent efforts by law enforcement and the heinous acts of a killer who killed his ex-girlfriend in a rage of anger. On July 8, 1987, the haunting words, "Murder on Elm Street, Carlsbad," shattering its peace. The mystery around 38-year-old Donna Sue Hyatt's murder and her nameless killer left the detectives grappling in a desperate quest for answers. Each step in the investigation led to a web of confusion finally arriving at a dead end. Who could have committed such a heinous crime? Why secrets lay concealed within the seemingly peaceful facade of this suburban haven? Welcome back to Mysterious Hook, where we shed light on mysterious cases across the country. Today, we are looking at a 36-year-old disturbing homicide which was finally solved. Beneath the sun-soaked desert skies, nestled in the heart of enchanting New Mexico, lies the small and captivating city of Carlsbad. Life here moves at its own rhythm, and this laid-back pace allows the residents to connect deeply with nature and their beautiful surroundings. Wide open spaces and warm southern hospitality define the essence of community. Carlsbad is a place where traditions run deep and where the scent of homemade barbecue wafts through the air. Imagine the horror that's unleashed when a violent crime occurs in a place like this, making everyone a potential suspect. Donna Sue Black Hyatt was born on a late summer day on August 28, 1948, in Carlsbad, Eddy County, New Mexico. To parents Roger and Sybil Black, she possessed an undeniable spirit that touched the lives of those around her. And as she grew, her personality only became more radiant. Donna attended New Mexico State University in Carlsbad. Guided by her unwavering faith, she became an active member of the First Baptist Church, finding solace and strength within its walls. She was also involved with the Christians Women Club, where she formed lasting connections and brought joy to everyone she met. She became a devoted mother to two beautiful girls, Michelle Perry and Angela Hulsey. She was beautiful inside and out, loved by her family and cherished by the community. Her story of love and faith sadly ended in brutality when her life was abruptly taken away, leaving families scared. The fateful night of July 8, 1987, one of Donna's daughters came home late. As the moon cast its pale glow on Elm Street and the clock inched closer to 11:40 p.m., the girl went around the house looking for Donna. To her shock, she found her mother lying lifeless in a large pool of Sue Hyatt had been assaulted and killed in her own home. She was 38 years old. The daughter made a frank call to the police that same night, and with it, the wheels of the investigation began to turn. The police searched the crime scene for any clues that could unveil the murderer, but whoever killed Donna was no amateur and had carefully covered all tracks. The detectives could only find traces of DNA that they hoped would lead to a potential suspect. With no breakthroughs at the crime scene, investigators attempted to retrace Donna's last moments, looking for any shred of information. Witnesses came forward, saying they had seen Donna leaving a nearby store with a tall Caucasian man around 9:15 p.m., the same night she died. Questions gripped the detectives. Was he a predator lurking in the shadows, biding his time until the opportune moment presented itself? Or did Donna's path intersect with another individual that night, a chance encounter that took a fateful turn? The haunting hours between 9:15 p.m. and 11:40 p.m. held the key to unraveling Donna's fate. However, there were too many possibilities and not enough leads. There was no way of knowing if she had invited the killer inside, if the killer had followed her home and forcibly entered, or if the killer simply had a key. These theories meant everyone was a suspect in the eyes of justice. The autopsy report revealed that Donna had been stabbed using a sharp blade of some kind. The experts analyzed the DNA, found it at the crime scene, and discovered that it did not belong to Donna or any frequent visitors of the house. The DNA of this unidentified person gave some initial hope to figuring out the killer's identity. But unfortunately, the police database showed no matches for the profile. The days turned into weeks and weeks into years, but no tips came in and the investigative wheels slowly ground to a halt. The man who's seen with Donna that night became an enigmatic figure, a phantom whose identity remained elusive. Each lead was pursued, yet like whispers carried away by the wind, the trail grew cold, fading into the shadows of time. Decades passed. Fateful night lingered in the collective consciousness of the Carlsbad Police Department. 36 years later, in 2023, Detective Joey Longcroft and Detective Tim Nance were ready to breathe life back into a long-forgotten case. They began reviewing the cold homicide case to find the elusive killer. Aware of the recent advancements in forensic technology, the detectives took help from genetic genealogy. In the realm of genetic genealogy, DNA, the building blocks of life, are the threads that connect past and present and can unearth criminals by exploring their familial ties. Crime scene evidence from Donna's home on Elm Street, carefully collected and preserved for over 3 decades, found its way into the hands of a meticulous scientist at Othram, a private genetic genealogy company in Texas. They used forensic-grade genome sequencing, or FGGS, to build a digital DNA profile of the suspect. Othram's team meticulously scoured online genealogy databases to find a match for the profile. Finally, in the labyrinth of ancestral records and hidden bloodlines, a name rose to the surface. Michael Ruff Wigley. Michael Ruff Wigley, from the city of Vegas, Texas, was born on March 6, 1959. At the tender age of 19, he was stationed at or hood as a soldier. But behind the facade of military discipline lurked a hidden malevolence that would shatter many lives. One of his early victims was Sandra Bellman, an innocent 18-year-old newlywed. But her journey through blissful matrimony was brutally cut short on July 18, 1980. Found near Copperas Cove, Texas, her lifeless body bore the scars of violence. It was revealed that she was beaten to death. Wigley was immediately arrested after the incident, and his indictment took place on October 1, 1980, where he was charged with the murder of Sandra. But the horrors did not end there, as there was an even darker revelation: a charge of assault against a Keeling woman committed on June 30, 1980, just 18 days prior to Sandra's murder. Soon enough, Wigley found himself confined within the cold embrace of the Coryell County Jail, bonds totaling $50,000. He was eventually released from prison and lived the life of a free man, but fate had other plans for him. On October 11, 1989, Wigley was driving along the northbound lane of US Route 60 in his 1978 Ford Mustang. Wigley's mind may have wandered, for he did not slow or stop at the railway intersection, despite the warning wails of an oncoming Santa Fe railway train. The fatal collision that followed was so powerful that the train carried the remnants of Wigley's Mustang for 0.6 of a mile. Michael Ruff was 30 years old when he lost his life. He was buried in the Llano Cemetery in Amarillo, Texas. Upon compiling relation to the existing case evidence, Detective Langrath and Detective Nice identified Wigley as the prime suspect. Through a series of interviews with family members, they were able to prove Wigley had been present in Carlsbad, New Mexico, around the time Donna was murdered. Even though he had already died and would not get the punishment he deserved, the investigators were keen to prove his guilt without a doubt and close the cold case. Finally, they obtained a warrant to exhume Wigley's body in Amarillo. Working with tandem with law enforcement officials in Amarillo, Wigley's once-forgotten grave was unearthed and the remains were quickly sent to Othram for analysis. The stage was set, the pieces were in motion, and the dance with destiny use of kinsnip testing. The experts at Othram tested Wigley's DNA against the profile created using crime scene evidence. The city of Carlsbad went its unwavering support in the form of financial assistance. The results were generated on April 11, 2023. Unsurprisingly, his DNA held the undeniable markers that led him to the crime scene and proved his guilt. It was a perfect match. Michael Ruff Wigley, though deceased, was accused of claiming Donna Sue Hyatt's life in 1987. Detective Joey Landgraf and Tim Nice of the Carlsbad Police Department emerged as the unsung heroes who had tirelessly pieced together the fragments of a decades-old puzzle. Their unwavering commitment and foresight proved instrumental in finally bringing closure to a haunting chapter in the city's history. Carlsbad Mayor Dale Janway expressed heartfelt appreciation for the officers and detectives from 1987, who valiantly responded to the haunting scene that fateful night. Their role in preserving the crime scene's integrity and diligently collecting crucial evidence was the pivotal factor that allowed the case to finally be solved 36 years later. It is our sincere hope that the recent efforts and the efforts of those involved in 1987 can bring some small form of peace and closure to the family of Donna Sue Hyatt and the community of Carlsbad, Janaway said. Tawnie Marie Baird was born in June 1993 to parents Dana Anderson and Casey Baird. Her parents would separate when she was 1, but remain cordial, with Casey talking to his daughter all the time and spending holidays with her. Her family said that Tawnie was a natural leader and someone that loved having a full social life. Her father remembered she had so many loyal and loving friends, it was like an entourage of people that just gravitated towards her. She lived in the city of Holiday, just on the outskirts of Salt Lake City, Utah. She enrolled at Salt Lake City Community College and was working as an accounting assistant. She was ambitious and had big dreams of being a famous singer and hoped to one day live in California by the beach. When Tawnie was 17 years old, She and a group of older friends were driving around and smoking marijuana in a car when a police officer pulled them over and searched the vehicle. The officer found more weed and drug paraphernalia in the back seat. One of her friends said Tawnie took the rap for everything, knowing that because her friends were older, they would have likely faced harsher consequences than her. She was charged with a Class B misdemeanor possession of a controlled substance. Her father Casey was concerned, having had his own experience with substance abuse, and decided to seek out his daughter's probation officer. He requested that she be given random drug tests, but the probation officer said he could not order this, and the issue was subsequently referred to the juvenile court. Tawnie was taken into the Division of Child and Family Services custody and placed in foster care with her aunt. After this, she was put into a youth treatment center for 90 days, where she would meet Victoria Mendoza. Victoria had had a lot of troubles in her life. She had lost her father to suicide when she was just 10 years old, and would offer and run away from home and skip school. She was frequently in and out of youth centers and facilities for various reasons. As well as losing her father, her mother was now terminally ill with cancer, and she and Victoria were living on next to no money in a one-bedroom apartment in Ogden. Dana said her daughter was in a very vulnerable place when the pair met. This was not Victoria's first time in a juvenile facility, and as this was Tawnie's, Tawnie felt very drawn to Victoria, feeling protected by her. Family and friends said it was very much a case of opposites attract. Victoria was a lot quieter and could get jealous easily, and as Tawnie was described as more playful and flirty, this often caused friction between the pair. One thing they did have in common, though, was a love of music, both often writing lyrics and songs for each other. What had started as a friendship soon blossomed into a romance, and the pair were inseparable. Tawnie was released from the facility after her 90-day stint was up, and a month later, Victoria was let out too. Victoria and her dad Casey went to pick Victoria up, and Casey recalled that the second he saw Victoria, he was confused at how opposite the pair were, and said his gut instinct left him feeling a little wary of his daughter's new love interest. He said that although there was something about Victoria that made him feel uneasy, he knew it meant a lot to his daughter, and he accepted the relationship. Dana welcomed Victoria into the home too, and everyone embraced the new couple. Her best friend Lacey said that Victoria was quite rough around the edges, but it was clear that they had a really strong connection and were very in sync. They would frequently post on social media showing a couple very much in love. But as with many cases and lives, social media is not normally an accurate representation of the real world. The turbulence in the couple's relationship was growing ever more, and they would break up and get back together very often. When Victoria cheated on Tawnie with one of her friends, Victoria uploaded a video to YouTube begging Tawnie to take her back. Pair again reconciled. Victoria was initially very close with Tawnie's family. Casey saw her like another daughter, and he and Dana supported her through her mother's terminal illness diagnosis. Casey was even in Victoria's mother's home when she passed away. Victoria then moved into Tawnie's family home permanently. Victoria was working hard on rebuilding her life and her future. Tawnie's grandmother said she paid to have some of Victoria's tattoos removed, and the family were encouraging and helping her to prepare for her very first job as a security guard. But soon, the fighting and volatility moved into the house, and Daly would often intervene in the arguments between the pair. Although the fights were escalating, she never thought Victoria would take anything any further. Tawnie's grandmother said that the couple's relationship had become very codependent and unhealthy. Victoria was overly protective and resented Tawnie having relationships with other people, but the pair put on a facade of acting like everything was okay. This all changed when Tawnie turned up at the house with a cut and a bleeding lip and a missing front tooth. Dana knew instinctively that Victoria was behind it and said she was calling the police. Tawnie begged her mother not to, knowing that because Victoria was now over the age of 18, the punishment would be a lot more severe. When Casey noticed that his daughter's tooth was missing and that Victoria had scratches on her face, he said that he was suspicious something much darker was going on. But the pair insisted the injuries were caused when a fight had broken out at a party and nothing else was said. Her grandmother stated, "Victoria knew how to manipulate all of us. She knew what to say." After Tawnie had her tooth knocked out by Victoria, Her best friend Lacey felt sure that would be the turning point that made her walk away, but she acted like nothing had happened and the pair continued on. By 2014, Tawnie and Victoria had now been together for 5 years and would often travel to Ogden to visit relatives. And on October 17, 2014, they did exactly that. During the night out, the couple had yet another altercation. Victoria spent a lot of the night in the bathroom before returning and demanding they both leave. The evening subsequently came to an abrupt end. Victoria, Tawnie, and Lacey all got into the car and set off home. Victoria sat in the back seat, still visibly angry about something that seemed unknown to everyone else. Tawnie dropped Lacey at her door. "I love you," Lacey said. "I love you too," said Tawnie, and the best friends parted ways. What happened next remains unclear, but according to Victoria, another argument broke out, and this time, Victoria pulled out a knife. She started stabbing Tawnie while she was driving, before Tawnie drove into a parking lot. At 2484 East Avenue in West Ogden, Victoria continued stabbing Tawnie, culminating in a total of almost 50 injuries. Victoria then phoned several people, including her friend Aaron, just after midnight on what was now October 18th, telling him what had happened. The police received the call and were dispatched to the parking lot. Authorities said who made the 911 call remains unclear, but it is thought that it was by one of the people that had been called by Victoria. When authorities got there, Victoria admitted that she had pulled a 4-inch knife from her front pocket and stabbed Tawnie in the heat of an argument. Police asked where the weapon was, and she told them it was still inside the car. Tawnie was slumped in the car with stab wounds to her whole body. She was pronounced dead at the scene. It was determined that Victoria had pushed Tawnie's body over to the passenger side of the vehicle before driving a while longer before calling her friend. Victoria was charged with first-degree murder. Her bail was initially set at $100,000, but it was soon revoked and she was denied it altogether. Her initial plea was that of not guilty, and she threatened to take her own life during the hearings. But with the evidence already so strong and the police only gathering more from friends and family, her lawyers advised that she change her plea. Victoria Mendoza eventually pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder felony charge. Casey, along with other family members, begged 2nd District Court Judge Joseph Bean to put the 23-year-old in prison for the rest of her life. Judge Bean said his hands were tied and he couldn't impose anything other than a 16 years to life sentence because it was not an aggravated murder case. The Board of Pardons determined that Victoria will not get the opportunity for a parole hearing until after she has served almost 24 years in the Utah State Prison. This will be dependent on several assessments and psychological evaluations. While in prison, Victoria started a TikTok account and a YouTube channel, despite this being a violation of the Utah Department of Corrections visitation policy. In a statement, a spokesperson said no one was aware of these recordings and the matter is being addressed and is currently under investigation. 99% of her domestic abuse I did not know about. I still carry so much guilt. Things I wish I'd known and things I wish I could have done. I believe she would still be here today had I truly understood all that was going on. On September 29, 2006, in St. Patrick's Church in Glasgow, United Kingdom, detectives discovered the body of a young woman. Little did they know, this crime was just the tip of the iceberg. Their investigation led them to one of the ruthless serial offenders in the country. Peter Tobin was born on August 27, 1946, in Johnstone, Scotland. He was the youngest of 8 children in the family of Marjorie and Daniel Tobin. Early on, Peter exhibited a difficult character, prompting his parents to send him to a boarding school in 1953 when he was just 7 years old. However, this seemingly did not yield much benefit. Later on, he was sent to a correctional institution. After completing this period, Peter moved to Brighton, England. There he started a relationship with Margaret Mount, a 17-year-old typist who found his personality irresistible. In August 1969, they got married. However, Peter soon revealed his cruel and controlling nature. Besides that, he was involved in criminal activities and was convicted and imprisoned for theft and forgery a year later. This led Margaret to divorce him in 1973. In the same year, Peter married Sylvia Jeffrey, a local nurse who also fell for his charm. That year they had their first son and named him Ian. Tragically, their daughter, Claire, died shortly after birth in 1974. Grieving over their lost child and suffering from Peter's abusive treatment led Sylvia to leave in 1976 with their young son. Decades later, when Peter was in his 40s, he pursued new romance again, this time with Kathy Wilson, who was only 16 years old at that time, vulnerable and impressionable, which made a tease for him. Together, they had a son named Daniel, the couple's only child. They married in 1989 and moved to Scotland. Proved challenging. Kathy couldn't go outside freely due to her husband's control over every aspect of her life. His violent behavior continued, reaching significant levels. Consequently, isolation exacerbated her living conditions. The young woman mustered the courage and chose to flee with her son in the late 1990s. It's uncertain if Kathy's departure triggered the worst aspects of the man's character to emerge. However, from this moment on, Peter unleashed a terrible side of himself upon the world, ready to cause much harm. Unfortunately, his path intersected with that of a lovely girl named Vicky Hamilton. Vicky was born in Scotland in 1976. She was the second child of Michael and Janet Hamilton, a married couple who had previously welcomed their firstborn daughter Sharon. Later, Lindsay joined the family. Nevertheless, serious disagreements between the spouses led to divorce being the most appropriate decision. Vicky, Lee and Lindsay stayed under their mother's care and moved to South London. The eldest daughter, Sharon, remained in Bathgate, BTHG, but this distance didn't hinder Vicky and Sharon from maintaining their close relationship. When Vicky turned 15, Sharon saw it as a good opportunity for her sister to take a step towards independence, a desire many teenagers have. After traveling alone by bus to Scotland for a weekend visit, Vicky was supposed to return home to her mother's house. It marked her first solo trip by bus. Sharon viewed it as a small yet significant adventure. On Saturday, February 9th, 1991, the sisters went shopping and engaged in continuous conversation. Sunday was typical, except that Vicky felt apprehensive about her return trip. The evening of February 10th was cold and snowy. Vicky ensured she had enough money for the fare and reviewed the bus route one last time with her sister before they hugged each other tightly. Standing at the bus stop, snacking on a bag of chips across from the police station, it was there Vicky's path crossed with Peter's fatefully. He forcibly dragged her into his car and committed unspeakable acts, raping her and then taking her life either out of malice or to prevent her from reporting him. Peter retained possession of the girl's purse. When Vicky did not arrive at her mother's house and there was no communication from her, her family began searching for her frantically in desperation. Simultaneously, they alerted the authorities about her absence. Once the police began investigating the disappearance, V's face became one of the most recognizable in Scotland. The search operation grew into one of the largest in the country's history. Amidst this uproar, Peter opted to relocate to southeast England, specifically to Margate, where he settled into a charming house with a garden. There, Peter brought Vicky's lifeless body. He wrapped her remains in plastic and concealed them beneath a layer of concrete. He then covered everything with soil. Neighbors thought he had dug a sandbox for his young son, who was 3 years old at the time. Peter's name never surfaced during the initial investigation into Vicky's disappearance. The police found no leads on Vicky's whereabouts and considered her a likely runaway, viewing her as an unhappy teenager due to her parents' divorce. Their theory of voluntary disappearance was reinforced on February 21st, 1991, when Vicky's purse was discovered near the main bus station in Edinburgh. Peter, always one step ahead of authorities, created this false lead and completely diverted the course of the investigation. Detectives spent 2 fruitless months searching in London. It is known that Vicky's mother died soon after. Over the next decade, Vicky's family and town residents continued to follow the case closely. But despite listing more than 7,000 names in the file, taking nearly 4,000 statements and presenting about 500 documents along with 380 potential pieces of physical evidence, all efforts led to a dead end. The case was eventually shelved. The next young woman who encountered Peter was Dina McNichol from Essex. She had a brother and 3 sisters. Her father was a jazz musician, and her mother had tragically died many years prior in a car accident. By age 18, Dina was known as good-hearted and cheerful, a wonderful friend. She had just completed high school and held great hopes for her future. On one hand, possibly, she aimed to take a gap year for travel. On the other hand, she aspired to attend university. However, nothing was certain, because although Dina had applied to several institutions of higher education, she hadn't yet received any responses. During the first weekend of August 1991, Dina attended a music festival in Hampshire. There, she met a young man named David Tremlett. Between dances, they discovered they liked each other. On Sunday, August 4th, they spent the night together in a tent. The following day, Dina assisted him in dismantling the tent, and they agreed to hitchhike back home separately. However, since part of their route was the same, they decided to hitchhike together. Tired but happy, the young couple hit the road to catch a ride. That's when Peter appeared and offered them a lift. David got out of the car first, and Dina wrote down his phone number before saying goodbye. Alone with the unknown driver, Dina was about to experience a real nightmare. On that same Monday, August 5th, 1991, Peter repeated his previous crime as with Vicky. He used Dina's scarf as a gag. After committing the crime, Peter withdrew money from Dina's account at ATMs in Hampshire and Sussex. When her relatives noticed someone withdrawing money from her account, they immediately suspected something was wrong. Her family knew how carefully she saved every penny and what she planned to use that money for, either traveling or continuing her education. Days and weeks went by with no word from Dina. The worst part for her family was living in uncertainty. Though unspoken aloud, everyone was sure something terrible had happened. After all, if Dina were alive, she would have returned home or called to explain her absence. As for Peter, he left Margate without saying goodbye or explaining anything. Later, in 1993, he settled in Hampshire, specifically in a rented apartment in Leek Park. He argued that he wanted to be closer to his son. On August 4th, 1993, 2 14-year-olds went to visit a local woman, but found she wasn't home. They decided to ask other neighbors if they had seen her around instead. As a result, they knocked on Peter's door. The man saw a unique opportunity and invited them into his home to wait for the force they were looking for. They saw that the man's 5-year-old son was in them, mistook him for a friendly person and agreed to enter. There is another version about the reasons for this meeting, which suggests it was not accidental. The 2 girls came to Peter's home in response to a request for a babysitter that the man had made. They trusted him because when they arrived, they saw his son and stayed to look after him. Everyone agrees that when the child fell asleep, Peter tied them up, threatened them with a knife, and forced them to drink alcohol. He then beat and raped them, injuring one of the girls. Just when they thought their lives would end at the hands of this extremely cruel man, a boy woke up. This saved them from suffering the same fatal fate that befell Vicky and Dina. In an effort to keep his son from realizing what had happened and understanding what kind of father he was, Peter decided to leave the apartment with the child. According to some reports, Peter left around 2 a.m., but before that he turned on the gas in the kitchen, hoping to complete his monstrous task. However, the girls regained consciousness and managed to escape. They went to the police and reported all the abuses committed by Peter, whom they described in detail. Peter returned his child to his mother and joined a religious sect called the Communion of Jesus under a false name. He hoped to go unnoticed there, but in the meantime, media published his photograph provided by police, making his face widely known. Due to mass media coverage, information about this man started pouring in, and his car was also identified thanks to BBC Crime Watch program. He was located, and after 40 days on the run, he was captured in Brighton. He appeared in court on May 18, 1994, where he pleaded guilty to sexual assault and indecent acts against 2 young girls and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, Peter did not serve his full sentence and was released in 2014 at the age of 58. Immediately after his release from prison, he went back to Scotland, aiming to relocate from the area where he was registered as a sex offender. For a while, he managed to stay off the radar until 6. under a false name and posing as a homeless person. He knocked on the door of the Church of St. Patrick in Glasgow. To avoid getting exposed, he adopted the name Peter McLaughlin. Dennis and Katie Curran, a married couple from the church's charitable group, recall that evening vividly when a homeless man sought shelter. Despite his vulnerable appearance, Katie had an uneasy feeling about him. Peter was brought up as a Catholic and soon felt at ease in this church. His apparent begging served as an effective disguise because it only aroused sympathy from parishioners, with few paying much attention to him. Consequently, he roamed freely around the church, an ideal hiding place for him. However, his predatory instincts stayed intact. Being in a sacred place held no significance for him. Calculating every move meticulously, Peter displayed eagerness to assist in church repairs. After about 6 or 7 weeks, he asked the priest if he could join the maintenance staff. At that time, people facing financial difficulties often sought refuge in churches. It was through such circumstances that Angelica Clark crossed paths with Peter. Angelica was a 23-year-old woman from Poland who came to Scotland during the summer of 2006. She wanted to spend her summer break working to earn money and fund her language studies back home. She lived at the parish house of St. Patrick's Church, where she also worked as a cleaner. Peter took an immediate liking to her and somehow convinced her to help him with various tasks occasionally. On Sunday, September 24, 2006, Angelica spent several hours assisting him in painting a shed. Some parishioners noticed them together before Peter attacked her at the back of the chapel. Lyca Brown, 47, and her husband Andrew, 46, who lived in a multi-story house overlooking the church, heard a woman scream through their open windows. In her statement afterward, Lyca described it as a brief scream that sounded like someone being forcibly restrained. It was so eerie that it compelled her to get up from the couch and approach the window, but she saw nothing. The scream heard by the Browns coincided with the moment when Peter caught the young girl off guard as she stood her back to him. He struck her forcefully and dragged her to the back of the chapel, where he continued to beat her. After she lost consciousness, he raped her and then inflicted several knife wounds. He hid the body in the basement under the floor near the confessional. At this point, Angelica was still alive. Several hours passed, and parishioners began to notice that the young girl was missing. That's when Dennis informed his wife, Katie, about Angelica's unusual disappearance. The police quickly initiated an investigation and started interviewing members of the community one by one. During these interviews, it came to light that Peter was the last person seen with Angelica, albeit disguised as Pete, a homeless laborer. Eventually, he became the prime suspect. Officers went to question him, found no evidence linking him directly to Angelica's disappearance, so they continued their investigation. Aware that it was only a matter of time before they discovered the body and traced everything back to him, Peter fled to London. By this time, Detective David Swindle had joined the investigation. He soon began to suspect that this case wasn't merely a disappearance. Based on their findings and collected testimonies, Detective Swindle believed it was unlikely Angelica would be found alive. Finally, on September 29, 2006, authorities discovered her body in the chapel. This news shocked British society due to both the nature of the crime and the location chosen by the perpetrator for hiding the body. Examining the girl's injuries led Detective David to suspect that this wasn't Peter's first crime. However, he didn't yet know how horrific and dangerous this individual turned out to be. Further revelations were inevitable. DNA found at the crime scene and on Angelica matched data in the United Kingdom's National Criminal Intelligence Database. That's when they learned exactly who they were dealing with. A man whose actions indicated deep-seated brutality and criminal sophistication. The individual they were looking for turned out to be Peter Tobin, whose fingerprints had been discovered at the crime scene. Consequently, the first step for the authorities was to publish his photograph in the media. His image was distributed nationwide, and the Scottish police reached out to the Metropolitan Police, initiating a search across the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, in London, Peter attempted to conceal himself by going to a hospital and pretending he had heart problems. He claimed he had chest pain and weakness on the left side of his body. Identifying himself as a plumber named James Kelly, He was examined by Dr. Nick Lasso. However, something about his demeanor and behavior raised concerns for the doctor. Initially avoiding eye contact, a behavior atypical of most patients, Peter became suspicious when tests failed to reveal any clear physical cause for his alleged pain. The doctor's suspicions were confirmed by a nurse who recognized Peter from a photograph that had been circulating in the media. As a result, both the nurse and doctor contacted the police. This phone call significantly altered the course of the investigation. On September 30th, police officer Alan Murray was dispatched to the hospital in London. Peter was taken into a room so Alan could speak with him. Immediately following this encounter, Peter was arrested. Although initially only charged with violating the sex offender registry, this approach allowed officers time to build a criminal case against him. Under Detective David's leadership, evidence gathered led to Peter's trial for crimes against Angelica in late March 2007. Despite substantial evidence against him, Peter denied committing violent acts against her, claiming instead they engaged in consensual sexual activity. He also denied providing false information to police and hospital staff. After 6 weeks of legal proceedings characterized by lies and manipulations on Peter's part, the truth finally prevailed. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, but with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Detective David and his team were convinced that there was more to Peter's story. While the trial was ongoing, detectives delved into Peter's life. They gathered additional evidence and compiled a dossier. This was done with the involvement of various law enforcement agencies across the country. To avoid harming or interfering with Angelica's case, they preferred to conduct their work confidentially. The joint police operation was known as Anagram. Part of their work involved connecting missing persons cases to places where Peter had been. During these investigations, they established 2 precise links, one in Bathgate and another in Margate. Several weeks later, a search was conducted in Peter's old house on the coast. They found a knife with DNA samples hidden in the attic. However, there was nothing else there. Then they went to the house where Peter lived in Margate. There, it became clear they were dealing with a serious criminal offender. Investigators dug up a sandbox in the garden of the house, one that Peter had made for his son. And shockingly enough, they found a female body there. But that wasn't all. When they continued searching at the same location, they found another body. A woman's handbag was also discovered at the scene, which the team preserved for DNA analysis. Forensic experts worked diligently to establish the identities of the 2 victims, determine their ages, and estimate their dates of death. They also analyzed traces from the handbag. These genetic traces were very strong, but initially yielded no matches in the National DNA database. However, on June 1st, 2007, there was a crucial breakthrough. The DNA matched Peter's fingerprint. This development proved monumental for investigators who deemed it necessary to move forward decisively in this direction by November. On August 14, 2007, authorities confirmed that one of the bodies found belonged to Vicky Hamilton, who disappeared at 15 years old. During her first independent, her family had been waiting for answers for 16 years. Later, it was announced that the second body belonged to 18-year-old Dinah McNichol, who was hitchhiking home after attending a concert. On September 1, 2008, the Royal Prosecution Service contacted Peter's lawyers and charged him with the murder of Vicky, leading to his trial. Officers had to restrain Vicky's father, Michael, after he saw Peter face to face. Michael later admitted he simply wanted Peter to know he was there to defend his daughter's name and protect her memory. After a month-long trial on December 2, 2008, Peter was found guilty of Vicky's murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The trial for Dinah took place in December 2009. On December 16th, after the defense failed to provide evidence exonerating their client, the jury found Peter guilty of Dinah's murder. He subsequently received his 3rd life sentence. On November 22, 2007, it was reported that Tobin had been attacked by fellow inmates. He sustained minor injuries. Shortly before this incident, the serial killer had confessed to a total of 11 murders. Recently, on October 8, 2022, Peter passed away in the hospital. Fond du Lac, Wisconsin described by residents as the all-American city and a beautiful, quiet place to raise a family and settle down. Fond du Lac is French and means the bottom or the farthest point of the lake. It gained its name because of its location at the bottom of the south end of Lake Winnebago. Among the just under 43,000 people that call Fond du Lac home live Tim, Eve, and Tamika Nance. Eve and Tim had met at a friend's party in 1992 when they were both 16 years old, and their relationship moved fairly quickly. Friends said they both had great senses of humor and were very charismatic, bonding straight away and loving to laugh and entertain people. They soon moved out of their parents' home and into an apartment together. Found out she was pregnant a short while later, and the pair started planning their wedding. In 1994, when Eve was 9 months pregnant, she was attacked outside of the couple's apartment by a man trying to steal her purse. Tim heard this and ran outside with a gun. In all the commotion, he shot the attacker in the foot. The wound wasn't fatal, and despite Tim and Eve's protests of self-defense, Tim was placed under arrest. As Tim was being taken away by officers, Eve went into labor and their daughter Tamika was born as Tim was being booked into jail. Tim would remain in jail on assault charges for almost a year, and when he was released in 1995, on the way home he and Eve stopped at the courthouse and finally got married. Eve was very close to her younger sister Tina, with Tina moving into her sister's home in 1995. 2 years later, Tina gave birth to her daughter Justice. Justice and Tamika were more like sisters than cousins, and the whole family were a tight unit. In 1997, would be arrested again, this time on a drugs charge, and he served 3 years for this offense. When 2002 came around, Tim and Tamika would make the move to Fond du Lac. Although Tim found finding work difficult due to his previous convictions, he worked a variety of odd jobs over the years. Eve was the main breadwinner and worked with those with mental health issues. Tim was happy to stay at home and look after Tamika as well as her cousin Justice. Tamika recalled, Tim was a popular man and had a lot of friends in the area, frequently hanging out at local bars and playing pool at the weekends. Time spent away from the home was an issue in the couple's relationship, mainly due to the fact that, according to friends, Tim was well known to be a ladies' man, and this accounted for a lot of his time away. Although Tim had previously tried to cover his tracks, the cheating was becoming more and more blatant, and was well aware of his many affairs. They would row a lot about it, and physical fights would often break out, with Tim even fracturing Eve's leg one night. By 2013, the couple had been married for 15 years, but Tim started up yet another affair. When Eve came home and found the pair in bed, she punched Tim in the face. Everyone was urging the couple to end the marriage, with Eve's brother asking why she was staying with him. Eve said she would rather have some of Tim's time than none of it at all. Tim told a friend he was having his cake and eating it too, and the relationship carried on as it had been. Later that year, on a typical Tuesday in November 2013, the usually quiet police department received a call from Eve Nance. Tim had gone out on Friday evening and not returned home. Eve was both worried and annoyed that he wasn't returning her calls. Many wondered if Tim had disappeared to go and meet another woman, but although all of his friends could attest that it wasn't unusual for Tim to leave home, it was unusual for him to drop out of contact completely, especially for 4 days. The police arrived at the couple's home, and Eve told them she was becoming concerned that something bad had happened to him. She told officers that the last time she had seen him, they had had yet another fight, and Tim had stormed out of the house and gone to Milwaukee, just over an hour away. Eve gave them a theory as to why he could be missing. She explained that one of the ways Tim made his money was by dealing drugs. Over time, Eve claimed the longer he was dealing, the more he was using drugs himself. Although he hadn't been using for a while, she was worried he may have relapsed and accidentally done something to himself, or done a drug deal gone wrong and someone had hurt him. Police knew that Tim's record wasn't clean and wondered if drugs was at the root of what had happened to him. But once they started talking to people that also knew Tim, a very different picture was painted. One of Tim's good friends, Tasha, said at one point he dealt a little weed, but he most definitely was not a hardcore drug user. The idea of him disappearing from the family home to go on a drugs binge seemed totally unbelievable. Authorities contacted Tim's cell phone provider, and to their concern, there had been no activity for days. It had now been 2 weeks since Eve said she last saw Tim, and the police were having little luck in finding any leads. They could draw no conclusion other than he had been met with foul play. Friends of Tim elaborated more on the fights between the couple and said that Eve had threatened her husband on several occasions, even brandishing a gun at him and the woman he was seeing. But they all acknowledged that Tim was far from perfect himself, and the relationship was on a downward spiral. The more his friends talked, the more everyone became more and more convinced that if something had happened to him, it was something to do with Eve. His friend Tasha said, another, more thorough search of the couple's house found a hole in the wall in the bathroom, while authorities were sure had come from a bullet. Fond du Lac Police Detective Bill Ledger noticed that the shower curtain liners in the bathroom were brand new and seemed out of place. Eve was asked to come to the station to clarify a few more things. She admitted that although she knew about the many affairs, she denied being bothered by them, saying she accepted who Tim was, and that was just how their relationship worked. She also denied ever threatening Tim and didn't involve herself with his business outside of the family home. But now the police had found a bullet hole and had witnesses that could attest to Eve threatening him on many occasions with a gun. But although they now suspected Tim was dead, officers had yet to find a body and they didn't have a weapon either, which meant they didn't have enough to arrest Eve for murder. They did, however, have enough to suggest probable cause. Probable cause requires that the police have more than just suspicion, but not to the extent of absolute certainty that a suspect has committed a crime. Eve's lawyer was fighting for her release, arguing that holding her without charge was a violation of her constitutional rights. After a week, Eve asked if she could talk to the investigators, as she now had a very different story to present. She told police that there had been an altercation at the house that night, and when she had tried to walk away by going into the bathroom, Tim had followed her. She said he was the one waving a gun around and started hitting her. In the process of her trying to get the gun away from him, the gun went off and Tim was shot twice in the chest, she claimed. The detectives asked why she didn't think to call 911, but Eve said she went blank, and instead of doing this, she took all his clothes off, wrapped him in plastic film from the windows and a shower curtain, put him in the car and drove away. She said she had tossed the gun and empty shell casings out of the window on Highway 41 en route to the woods, where she would ultimately leave Tim's body. Where Tim's phone ended up remains unknown. She gave the police a rough location as to where they could find Tim, and a search quickly got underway. That same evening on Thanksgiving Day, 2013, Tim Nance's body was finally found. He was naked, lying frozen in the snow in the fetal position, almost 50 miles away from his home. An autopsy later revealed that Tim had died as a result of 2 gunshot wounds to the head, not to the chest, and he had been shot sometime on November 1st. Police and prosecutors firmly believed that Tim was actually in the shower at the time he was shot and did not see the attack coming. The medical examiner testified that both shots could not have been fired at close range during a struggle, as Eve had said, and the placement of one of the bullet holes in the wall appeared to confirm this. During their investigation, police also obtained a video of Eve and her sister Tina buying supplies at a store at about 7:30 p.m. on the same day Tim was killed. Tina picked up shower curtain liners and curtain hooks. They argued that the curtain liners were replacements for the ones now covered in Tim's blood. Authorities believe that Tina had helped to conceal the crime. Phone records showed that Eve had called Tina 5 times just minutes after Tim's death. Officers also argued that Eve wouldn't have been able to move Tim's body without help, and this was where Tina came in. Eve was arrested and charged with murder, and Tina was also placed under arrest. A judge set Eve's bail at $100,000, which was soon increased to $300,000, and $50,000 was set for Tina. In January 2016, 39-year-old Eve Nance stood trial, and she pled not guilty. A big part of the prosecution's case was that Eve claimed that Tim was shot in the chest during a fight, but the medical examiner clearly showed that the 2 bullets had entered into Tim's head. The medical examiner also talked about the placement of the bullet hole, which they said showed inconsistencies in Eve's account. And according to the prosecution, the motive was simple: rage and revenge. After years of threatening with him, she had finally done it. They argued that Tim had been taking a shower, hence him being found without clothes on, and Eve had ambushed him and shot him without warning. The prosecution described it as an execution, but according to some experts put forward by the defense, was suffering from battered person syndrome. After years of infidelity and a volatile and violent relationship, this had pushed her to her limits. Although she had reacted in anger, it was also in self-defense, something which friends of Tim strenuously denied. Tim and Eve's daughter, Tamika, however, said that her father was always the aggressor and wanted things his own way all the time. Less than 2 weeks later, the jury had reached a verdict. They sided with the prosecution. Eve was found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide and hiding a corpse. The judge believed that some leniency should be given under the circumstances of everything that had been put forward. When it was her time to speak, Eve turned around to face her daughter Tamika and said, "I love you. Whatever happens here today, I love you very much." Several people spoke on Eve Nance's behalf, including Tamika, who said, "My mother is not a monster. She is a wonderful person. I miss my father. I can't lose her too." Eve told the judge that she had loved her husband since the first time she saw him, and she still loved him. She said she had no excuse for what she did. No one except the district attorney Eric Toney spoke on behalf of Tim. He said Tim was everyone's best friend and had turned his life around. In Tina Yule's case, she was found guilty of hiding a corpse as party to the crime, aiding a felon and obstructing an officer. Fond County Circuit Judge Peter Grimm ordered Tina spend 24 months in prison with the condition of probation for 5 years. If the conditions of probation were not met, would have to spend another 4 years in state prison and then have 5 years extended supervision. Even Tina both filed appeals against their decisions, but both appeals were denied. What happened on that day back in November 2013 can never be known for sure, but what is known is that a young girl essentially lost both of her parents in a terrible way. What actually happened, how it came to be, and the events leading to Tim dying in the bathroom that night remain unconfirmed. Stories of the couple's relationship is contradicted by friends and family of both Tim and Eve, but many of Tim's friends said they didn't want Eve get life in prison because they knew Tim wouldn't have wanted it, and said that had he survived the shooting, he would likely have forgiven her. Eve Nance will be in her 60s when she becomes eligible for parole. The case of Sylvia Lychens. Sylvia Marie Lychens was born on January 3, 1949, in Lebanon, Indiana, USA, to carnival workers Lester Lychens and his wife Betty Lychens, formerly Grimes. She was the third of 5 children, with 2 older twins, Daniel and Diana, and 2 younger twins, Benny and Jenny. Sylvia's younger sister Jenny had polio, which left her with a significantly weakened leg, causing her to limp noticeably. She had to wear a steel brace on her leg to help her walk. Sylvia's parents had a tumultuous marriage, with constant moving and financial struggles. They worked at carnival booths throughout Indiana during the summer, selling candy, beer, and soft drinks. To help out, the Lychens children would often travel with their parents, but Sylvia and Jenny frequently stayed with relatives, mostly their grandmother. This arrangement not only kept the young girls safe, but also allowed them to have a more stable education. From a young age, Sylvia took on various responsibilities, including babysitting, running errands for neighbors and friends, and completing household chores like ironing clothes. In doing so, she earned some money, which she used to buy things for herself and occasionally shared with her mom. Those who knew her described Sylvia as a friendly, confident, and charming girl. She had long, wavy, light brown hair that fell just below her shoulders, and her friends affectionately called her Cookie. Despite her vibrant personality, Sylvia was self-conscious about her smile due to a missing front tooth, which she lost during a childhood accident while playing with one of her brothers. Sylvia loved music, particularly the Beatles, and was very protective of her younger sister Jenny, who was shy and less secure. The sisters frequently visited a local skating rink where Sylvia would assist Jenny, holding her hand as Jenny relied heavily on her stronger leg. In June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny Lychens were living with their parents in Indianapolis. The following month, their mother was arrested and jailed for theft. Shortly thereafter, their father arranged for his younger daughters to stay with Gertrude Bernese, a mother of 2 girls, Paula and Stephanie, whom the Lychens sisters had met at Arsenal Technical High School. Gertrude promised their father that she would care for the girls as if they were her own until his return, which was expected to be just after the 4th of July celebrations. The Lychens sisters, Sylvia and Jenny, moved into the Benici home at 3850 East New York Street. Their father, older brothers, and eventually their mother went on the road with a carnival on the East Coast. As part of the arrangement, Gertrude Benici would receive $20 a week to care for the sisters until their family returned in November. At first, things seemed normal at the household. Sylvia got along well with Stephanie, bonding over their shared love of popular music and helping with household chores. The Lychens sisters regularly attended Sunday school with the other Benici kids, and the pastor often commended Sylvia for her kindness and respect for sacred matters. However, when the payments for hosting the girls started coming in late, Gertrude's frustration mounted, and she began to mistreat them. This mistreatment involved physical punishments with thick objects, which eventually escalated into regular beatings, starvation, and humiliation. Sylvia faced the brunt of the abuse. Gertrude and her daughter Paula repeatedly accused Sylvia of engaging in inappropriate behavior with boys, which led to Gertrude physically kicking Sylvia in the groin and Paula physically attacking her. The girls were forced to eat food they disliked, and Sylvia was even beaten by Stephanie's boyfriend, Randolph Hubbard. Daily life at the Banfi residence was brutal. Violence escalated over time. Paula's attacks on Sylvia were savage, including punching her in the face and breaking her own wrist. She targeted Sylvia's mouth and eyes, then used her cast to inflict more harm. The sisters faced relentless verbal and psychological abuse, including Gertrude's cruel accusations of promiscuity and forced attacks on each other. The abuse of Sylvia didn't only come from the Banovsky family. Coy Hubbard and his friends would visit Gertrude's home, tormenting Sylvia physically and verbally. Gertrude and her kids would join in, inflicting harm. Neighborhood kids would beat Sylvia using her as a punching bag, and Gertrude would humiliate her, forcing her to undress and perform sexual acts for their entertainment. Gertrude expelled Sylvia from school as punishment for stealing a gym suit, which Sylvia had done because Gertrude refused to buy her clothes. This cruelty led to severe physical abuse, including beatings with a police belt and kicks to the genitals. Despite Stephanie's attempts to intervene, Gertrude continued to torment them, inflicting further pain by burning their fingertips with matches and whipping them. A few days later, Gertrude again employed the police belt to repeatedly whip Jenny after she allegedly stole a single tennis shoe from school to wear on her stronger foot. Due to the escalating frequency and brutality of the torture and mistreatment, Sylvia gradually became incontinent, a condition for which she was denied access to the bathroom and forced to wet herself as further punishment. On October 6, 1965, Gertrude confined Sylvia to the basement, binding her with rope. She often kept Sylvia naked, providing her with minimal sustenance and frequently denying her water. Sylvia was consistently tied to the stair railing in the basement, her feet barely touching the ground. The Banfi family would occasionally interrupt their physical and emotional torment to watch their favorite TV shows. Neighborhood boys would even pay 5 cents each to view Sylvia's body on display, participating in her humiliation, beating, burning, and mutilation during her captivity in the basement. Gertrude and her children restrained and silenced Sylvia, then submerged her in a bathtub of scorching hot water. Next, they rubbed salt into her injuries. After this incident, an anonymous caller, who was the father of a neighborhood boy named Michael John Monroe, contacted Arsenal School to report that a girl with severe skin lesions was living at the Banvi household. Since Sylvia had been absent from school for several days, a school nurse visited Gertrude's residence to investigate. Gertrude claimed to the nurse that Sylvia had run away from home the previous week, and that she was unaware of her current whereabouts. She also alleged that Sylvia's skin lesions were a result of her poor personal hygiene and that she was a negative influence on both her own children and her sister. The school did not pursue any further investigation into Sylvia's whereabouts or well-being. In mid-October, John Benazzi Jr. subjected Sylvia to a cruel and sadistic prank. He offered her a plate of soup, only to swiftly pull it away as she attempted to eat with her hands, which was difficult for her due to her severe malnutrition. Afterwards, Gertrude permitted Sylvia to sleep upstairs, but warned her that she must not wet the bed. Before going to sleep, Sylvia quietly asked Jenny for a glass of water, hoping to avoid dehydration. However, the next morning, Gertrude found that Sylvia had urinated on herself, and as a punishment, forced her to perform a humiliating and degrading act, masturbating with a glass bottle in front of the Banby children. Shortly thereafter, Gertrude shouted for Sylvia to return to the kitchen, then ordered her to strip naked before proclaiming that she had branded her daughters, and now she was going to brand her. Gertrude began carving the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," onto Sylvia's abdomen with a heated needle. When Gertrude was unable to complete the markings, she instructed 14-year-old Richard Hobbs to finish etching the words into Sylvia's flesh while she took Jenny to a nearby grocery store. In what Hobbs would later insist were short, light etchings, he continued to brand the text into Sylvia's abdomen as she clenched her teeth and moaned. Richard and 10-year-old Shirley forcibly took Sylvia to the basement. There, they attempted to inflict a burn on Sylvia's body, specifically beneath her left breast, using an anchor bolt to create a mark resembling the letter S. However, due to their mistake of applying part of the loop in reverse, the resulting deep burn scar would instead look like the number 3. On that grim night, after enduring terrible abuse, Sylvia told her sister Jenny that she knew Jenny didn't want her to die, but she was sure she was going to die. The next day, Gertrude woke Sylvia and forced her to write a letter while dictating its contents. The plan was sinister. They intended to deceive Sylvia's parents into believing that Sylvia had run away from the Banby residence. The content of this letter was intended to frame a group of anonymous local boys for extensively abusing and mutilating Sylvia, after she had initially agreed to engage in sexual relations with them. After writing the letter, Sylvia was again tied to the basement stair railing, while Gertrude finalized her plan to abandon her in Jimmy's forest with the help of John Jr. and Jenny. Gertrude offered Sylvia cookies, but she refused, saying, "Give them to the dog, I don't want them." Enraged, Gertrude forced the cookies into Sylvia's mouth, and then she and John brutally beat her, targeting her stomach. On the morning of October 26th, Sylvia's condition had deteriorated. She could hardly speak or control her movements. Gertrude brought her to the kitchen, propping her against the wall, and tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk. However, Sylvia struggled to hold the glass, which further infuriated Gertrude, who tossed her to the floor before returning her to the basement. Soon, Sylvia became delirious, repeatedly moaning and muttering incoherently. When Paula asked her to recite the alphabet, Sylvia couldn't get past the first 4 letters and was unable to stand up from the floor. Sylvia faced neighborhood bullies in the basement. She pointed out familiar faces shouting names. After a failed attempt to bite a rotten pear, Jenny reminded her she couldn't feel her teeth, having lost one at 7. Exhausted and desperate, Sylvia tried to escape but collapsed. Gertrude punished her brutally, striking her head and knocking her out. Shortly after, at 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs returned to the Banby residence and rushed to the basement, where he found Stephanie crying and cradling Sylvia's frail, wounded body. After their mother instructed Stephanie to clean Sylvia's body, she and Richard decided to give Sylvia a warm, soothing bath and dress her in fresh clothes. They laid her on a mattress in one of the bedrooms, where she whispered her final wish, for her father to be by her side or to be taken home. After suffering severe punishment and weakening from starvation, Sylvia finally succumbed to her injuries and died. When Stephanie realized Sylvia wasn't breathing, she attempted to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, while Gertrude hysterically screamed at the children in the house that Sylvia was faking her own death. Initially, Gertrude struck Sylvia's lifeless body with a book, yelling at her that she was lying and pretending in a futile attempt to rouse her. Soon, overcome with panic, Gertrude instructed Richard Hobbs to call the authorities from a nearby payphone. When the police arrived at the address around 6:30 p.m., Gertrude escorted the officers to the bedroom, where she revealed Sylvia's brutally beaten and mutilated body lying on a dirty mattress. She then handed over the letter that Sylvia had been coerced into writing. Gertrude claimed to have cared for the young girl for over an hour before her death, applying antiseptic to her wounds in a futile attempt at first aid. According to Gertrude, Sylvia had run away from home with a group of teenagers, returning to her house that afternoon, bare-chested and clutching the note. Having declared to everyone in the house that Sylvia's death was meant to happen, Paula looked at Jenny and calmly said that if Jenny wanted to live with them, they would treat her like their own sister. Following instructions she had received before the police arrived, Jenny recited the rehearsed version of the events leading up to Sylvia's death before whispering to the officers to take them away and that she would tell them everything. The formal statement from Jenny Lychens led to the arrest of Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. Benazzi on suspicion of Sylvia's murder just hours after her body was discovered. That same day, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs were also arrested and charged with the same crimes. The three older Benazzi children, along with Coy Hubbard, were placed in a nearby juvenile detention center, while the younger Benazzi children and Richard Hobbs were held at the Indianapolis Child Guardians Home, all detained without bail pending trial. Initially, Gertrude denied any involvement in Sylvia's death, but only a day into her detention, she confessed to knowing the children and acknowledged that her daughter Paula and Coy Hubbard had physically and emotionally abused Sylvia. Gertrude also admitted to forcing the girl to sleep in the basement on approximately 3 occasions when she had wet the bed. When an officer suggested that the probable reasons for Sylvia's incontinence were her mental distress and kidney injuries, Gertrude became evasive. Paula showed no remorse, signing a statement that admitted to repeatedly beating Sylvia. She also confessed to fracturing Sylvia's wrist and committing other brutal acts, including pushing her down the basement stairs 2 or 3 times. John Jr. confessed to whipping Sylvia once and frequently using his fist to abuse her, also admitting to burning her with matches on multiple occasions. The autopsy of Sylvia's body revealed over 150 separate injuries across her body, and she was severely emaciated at the time of her death. The injuries varied in location, nature, severity, and healing stage, including burns, severe bruises, and extensive damage to muscles and nerves. Her vaginal cavity was swollen and nearly closed, although an examination determined her hymen was still intact, debunking Gertrude's claims that Sylvia had been 3 months pregnant and the accusations of prostitution and promiscuity. The official cause of Sylvia Marie Lychens' death was determined to be a subdural hematoma, resulting from a severe blow to the right side of her head. The doctor also noted that the shock she sustained, primarily due to prolonged and severe injury to her skin and subcutaneous tissue, as well as chronic malnutrition, contributed to her demise. By the time her body was discovered, rigor mortis had fully set in, suggesting that she may have been deceased for up to 8 hours prior to discovery. Interestingly, although the autopsy revealed that Sylvia had been recently bathed, possibly post-mortem, this action may have accelerated the loss of body temperature and subsequent onset of rigor mortis. In May 1966, Gertrude B. Sess, her children Paula and John, and 2 neighborhood youths, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, were tried and convicted of neglect, torture, and murder in relation to Sylvia's death. Following 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Gertrude B. Sess guilty of first-degree murder, sentencing her to life imprisonment. However, she was paroled in 1985. Paula was convicted of second-degree murder and released in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were found guilty of manslaughter, serving less than 2 years in the Indiana Reformatory before being granted parole on February 27, 1968. In Indiana, the brutal murder and torture of Sylvia Lychens is considered the state's worst crime. A seasoned investigator from the Indiana Police Department with 35 years of experience described it as the most sadistic case he had ever encountered. Sylvia tragically lost her life on October 26 in Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Her parents were expected to return for her and her sister in November, but unfortunately, Sylvia passed away before their arrival. Sylvia and her sister Jenny lived in fear of reporting the escalating abuse and neglect to family members or school authorities. They worried that speaking out would worsen their already desperate situation. Jenny, in particular, struggled to overcome the urge to inform family members, fearing that Gertrude would retaliate by subjecting her to the same torture and abuse as her sister. Additionally, Jenny faced harassment from neighborhood girls who ridiculed and occasionally beat her whenever she mentioned Sylvia's situation. The middle-aged Bassesi couple, along with other families in the neighborhood, had suspicions or had witnessed signs of the girls being mistreated, but they were too afraid to report it to the authorities. Consequently, no one intervened to stop the abuse the Sylvia sisters suffered, and tragically, no one was able to rescue them from their horrific ordeal in time. In the aftermath, all those responsible for her torture and murder received prison sentences, although some did not serve their full terms. However, they cannot escape the guilt and horror they inflicted, which will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Just before 3 p.m., 6-year-old Fay Marie Swetlik skipped off the school bus from Springdale Elementary School. She met her mother, Selena, and they walked the short distance back home, talking about their days. Fay was described as bright, funny, and lively, with bundles of energy. Selena called her her magical little fairy that always wanted to play and have fun. Her mother said she loved everyone and everything, and always wanted people to be as happy as she was. Selena said her daughter was always the first one to give a compliment, even randomly to people she's never met before. We couldn't go anywhere without her stopping 3 or 4 different people to compliment them, be it their hair or if a color looked good on them, and she always wanted to make new friends. When they got home, had a small snack before she went out to play in the yard, something she did a lot, with neighbors confirming they often saw her. Selena was regularly checking outside and keeping an eye out, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. A neighbor reported to having seen Fay running towards a shared fence with Napa Auto Parts sometime between 3:30 and 4 p.m. At around 3:45 p.m., Selena checked outside again. Her daughter Fay was gone. After running around to all the neighbors, making several calls and searching the area, she phoned 911 at 5 p.m. Minutes later, the police arrived at the house, and by 5:30 p.m., 50 responders would be on scene. Everything was moving at a rapid pace, and at 6 p.m. the Federal Bureau of Investigation got involved, as well as the community springing into action. Everyone wanted to help, but police urged citizen volunteers to stand down and let the professionals handle the search. Chad Swetlik, Fay's father, was soon informed that she was missing, and FBI agents would soon be at his house to search it. But Fay wasn't there, and phone records would later confirm that Chad was at home at the time his daughter had gone missing. Officers had already started going door to door and asked neighbors with security cameras to contact them and turn in any footage. The FBI provided a helicopter, and K-9 officers were deployed as well. Despite all of this, Department of Public Safety's Chief Byron Snellgrove said at the time, there did not appear to be enough evidence to point to this being an abduction, and Fay's disappearance didn't meet the criteria for an Amber Alert. At 7 a.m. the next morning, a hotline was set up and almost 300 tips would come in. Police would follow up on every lead, but nothing came back. More than 250 officers and investigators from agencies across the country had now joined in the hunt for Fay. Roadblocks were set up around the Churchill Heights area, and every car coming in and out was searched. It had now been almost 24 hours since Selena had made the 911 call. A press conference was held to share some more details. Authorities still didn't know if Fay had simply walked away from her home and become lost, or maybe injured, or if she'd been abducted. But by now, it was seeming less and less likely that the 6-year-old had gone off of her own accord. Investigators released footage from the local school bus to show everyone what Fay was wearing that afternoon, hoping to generate some more leads. She was wearing polka-dot rain boots and a black t-shirt with the word peace on it. During their intensive search, authorities interviewed a number of people, including Selena, her live-in boyfriend Carter, and Fay's father Chad. At this point in time, police said they weren't ruling anyone out, and one of the detectives said there were no clear suspects. But members of Fay's family would soon be cleared after searches of homes. Analysis of phone records and alibis ruled everyone out. On February 12th, police released an image of 2 cars seen leaving the area Fay lived in around the time she was last seen. But the drivers of the cars were quickly located and ruled out as well, and the police were back at square one. There was still no sign of Fay and no clues pointing to where she might be. The morning of Thursday, February 13th, was the scheduled day for the bins to be collected and emptied. Officers quickly needed to do one last search before any evidence in anyone's bin was taken away. While they were searching through the bins at the homes around Piccadilly Square, they found something at number 602, and clearly just in time. They described the evidence as critical but didn't immediately reveal what it was. Whatever they had found, it led them back to the woods. After quickly pulling together and remapping the route and area they needed to focus on, Less than half an hour later, the search for Fay Swetlik would come to a devastating end. Byron Snellgrave was looking through the wooded area once more when he found her body in a shallow grave, less than 200 feet from her home. It would later be determined that she had died of asphyxiation just hours after she had been abducted and her body had been moved. A mere matter of minutes after Fay was found, officers were alerted to something else back at Piccadilly Square. A man had been found, bleeding and dead on his back porch. He was not identified, and police initially kept quiet about whether or not there was a link between the two. The man that had been found on his porch would soon be revealed to be 30-year-old Cody Scott Taylor. But who was he, and what link, if any, did he have to Fay? Those who knew Cody said he was a loner who constantly had a negative outlook on life. They claimed that Cody had described himself as someone that lived without hope, was asexual, and an incel. He lived with a roommate who he worked with, and his roommate said that Cody had expressed feelings of depression as well as suicidal thoughts, and he mostly kept to himself. Cody had enrolled at the University of South Carolina at Columbia and studied mathematics, but there is no record of him graduating, and according to some sources, he dropped out in 2009. Aside from a few traffic violations, he had no history with the police. He had moved between jobs a lot, but was working at a wing stop alongside his roommate at the time. As soon as they found Cody's body, police began to piece everything together and connected the dots over the coming hours and days. Although he seemingly had no link to Fay in any way, the evidence the police described as critical was found in the bin that belonged to his home. Investigators believe that Cody took Fay from her yard, but it remains unconfirmed how he abducted her and whether he used any kind of force or lured her away. It is believed that he asphyxiated her in a matter of hours after abducting her and somehow managed to conceal her body in his apartment for 2 days, without investigators finding her when they searched the place twice. On February 12th, while searching the area, police had actually knocked on the door of Cody and his roommate. Cody wasn't home, so officers spoke to his roommate and took a look around. A full laundry bag was in the house, one which his roommate identified as Cody's, and detectives took a DNA sample from it. They also noted that Fay's missing persons poster was lying on a table. After they were done with the search of the property, Cody's roommate's alibi had checked out. The investigators left. When Cody returned from work that day, his roommate recalled him acting in a strange and erratic way. His roommate would also soon realize that since Fay had been missing, the apartment had started to develop a strong and odd smell. He said he initially dismissed the odor as being cheap air freshener that Cody was using to try and conceal the smell of weed, but his roommate did note that Cody never actually used air freshener, and this in itself seems strange. Later that day, just before 6 p.m., police returned to search the pair's apartment again, this time hoping to get an interview with Cody, which they did. When he was asked about his whereabouts, he was unable to give them a strong enough alibi. He said he was sleeping at home, alone. Officers left again, finding nothing out of place. But they would soon realize that same day, a surveillance camera was collecting footage which would become invaluable. The footage showed officers going through the wooded area in their search for Fay. At around 1 a.m. on what was now February 13th, the same camera picked up something else. It captured a light coming from a spot in the same area of woods. Someone police would later confirm was Cody Taylor. 6 hours later, just before 7 a.m., cameras picked up Cody walking through the streets and going to a Walmart on Augusta Road. He wandered around the garden department for about 20 minutes, telling an employee he was working on his garden but didn't know what to buy. According to sources, Cody's roommate was emphatic that Cody had no interest in gardening. He also told investigators that Cody rarely had discretionary money but had just gotten some money from his workplace in the hours before the trip. The employee at Walmart would later tell police Cody grabbed random seeds from a display and appeared to have no plan for his garden. Around 10 minutes later, he paid for several bags of soil and fertilizer, plus a box of Pop-Tarts, and left. Cody then booked a ride through the app Lyft. According to the driver, Cody made him feel very uncomfortable, and when the driver casually asked if he was doing some gardening, he dodged the conversation. While driving, they went past some police and other media who were out looking for Fay. The driver asked him if he knew her, and Cody replied, "I don't know her and never met her before." About 40 minutes later at 7:47 a.m., the camera that had picked up Cody moving around in the woods in the dark also captured more in the same spot. Police determined that Cody was carrying one of the bags of soil he had just purchased up into the woods where he would bury Fay. He stays for about a minute before heading back down the hill without the bag. When the police searched the bins of Cody's home, they had found a child's polka dot rain boot and a ladle covered in dirt. Following this huge find, they headed to the woods to conduct another search. CCTV footage showed the moment that KC Public Safety Director Byron Snellgrove discovered Fay's partially buried body next to her other tiny polka dot boot. A white plastic trash bag was wrapped around her neck. Cody Taylor then stood on his back porch and slit his throat with a knife. As well as the CCTV and the evidence found in Cody's bin, they would soon gather more. When Fay's body was examined, she was found to have Cody's DNA under her fingernails. Her DNA was also found on the ladle along with Cody's, and both sets of DNA were found in the black laundry bag. All endings, evidence and facts point to the exact same conclusion. Cody Taylor abducted and murdered Fay Swetlik and was the sole perpetrator of this horrible case, said Byron Snellgrove. They also believe that Cody acted alone. It was announced that Fay's funeral expenses would be covered by a funeral home, and on February 21st, a public memorial was held for her. Hundreds of people, including first responders and officers, turned out to pay their respects, with many wearing pink and purple, Fay's favorite colors. In Selena's words, the sparklier, the better. Fay loved getting letters and writing notes, so journals were set up and her family wanted everyone to write a few words or draw a picture in colorful pens. It would take a year for the authorities to officially close the case. It's impossible to know exactly what happened that afternoon and why it did. Police confirmed that all the evidence pointed one way, but sadly, there are still so many more questions that can never be answered. No motive has ever been determined for the crime and likely never will be. Cody left no suicide notes or any other information in his home indicating why he had done this. Multiple agencies have tried to access the data from Cody's phone but have not succeeded, and no evidence was found on his computer. While KC police concluded their part, the FBI investigation is still ongoing, as is a review by the State Law Enforcement Division. In July 2021, the director of KC Department of Public Safety, Byron Snellgrove, who played such a vital role in Fay's case, announced his retirement after more than 35 years in law enforcement. In a shallow grave on the morning of February 13th, 2020 will never ever leave me. This tragic case has taken a toll on officers who were dedicated to finding her. Nearly 1 year later, they haven't forgotten the disappearance and murder of Fay Swetlik immediately became and always will remain incredibly personal for each of us. Fay's death evidently had a profound impact on the community in which she lived, one that will continue to be felt for a long time to come. Springdale Elementary School unveiled a buddy bench that had been dedicated in memory of Fay. In Selena's eulogy for her daughter, she asked that people continue to honor Fay's memory through love, something she said was the most important magic. She asked that they try and be a little more like Fay, to be more kind, to compliment a stranger, to dance in the rain, to stop and smell the flowers, to just show a little bit more love to everyone you meet. Joey Lynn Offett was born October 11, 1973 and lived in Sykesville, Pennsylvania. She was described as a very trusting, naive, and religious woman and was a mother of 3. On July 12, 2007, at approximately 4 a.m., her neighbors awoke to a loud explosion at Joey's home at the 90 block of Fugate Drive. They discovered that her house was on fire and called 911. After the fire department extinguished the blaze, they found the body of Joey's 6-week-old infant in the bathtub deceased. But Joey was nowhere to be found. Investigators couldn't determine the infant's cause of death, but they were able to determine that the baby had been dead before the fire started. Investigators stated that the fire had been arson, set with an accelerant, and a gas can was found inside the home. Joey's purse and identification were located in the rubble. Thankfully, her 2 other children, aged 2 and 9, were not home at the time of the fire and were with other family members. Raw hamburger meat was found on her kitchen counter with maggots in it, and tests revealed the meat had been out for 7 to 9 days. Police found Joey's car 4 days later in State College, Pennsylvania, parked at the Nittany Gardens apartment complex several hours away from her home in Sykesville, where she had previously lived with Alexis Brolin, the father of her 2 youngest children. There was no sign of her at the scene, and nobody at the apartment complex remembered seeing her recently. The car was backed into the parking space neatly, and her loved one stated she was not a good driver and couldn't have parked it so well. Also, the driver's seat was pushed far back, but Joey was short and petite. 33-year-old Joey suffered from a speech impediment and developmental disabilities. Several years prior to her disappearance, a psychologist had said Joey had the mind of a 14-year-old. Her family says she was a very loving mother and would have never left her children intentionally. However, her family said she did have trouble keeping jobs and relationships. Alexis and her had a very rocky relationship and were not ready to live together. So Joey and the children lived in a home her mother had bought for her while he lived in Clearfield. Alexis told authorities he had been at Joey's house on July 3rd, and they got into an argument because he did not like her giving the baby a bath in a dirty sink. The next day, Alexis called Joey's house several times and didn't get an answer, and messages were never returned. He said Joey had a problem with handling any sort of critique and would shut down for a day or 2 after arguments. He figured she was just giving him the silent treatment when he could not reach her. On July 5th, Alexis returned to Joey's house, and again, she didn't answer the door. That same day, a neighbor thought he saw her walking in the neighborhood with a stroller. The neighbor told authorities that he greeted her, but she ignored him and kept walking, and this was the last sighting of Joey. Over the next few days, Alexis says he went to her home again and noticed her car was missing. Her mother also continued to try to get in touch with her during this time. On July 11th, Alexis and the nurse from the state home health, who had been trying to reach Joey to examine her son Lex, met at Joey's house and noticed the baby's car seat and diaper bag were still in the same place inside the house. Alexis left another note that read, "He will call the police if he does not hear from her soon." On July 12th, the day of the fire, Alexis reported her missing. Neighbors told police that Joey's car was in the driveway at 3 a.m. 1 hour before the fire occurred. The only lead authorities had was prior to her disappearance. Joey had been frequently meeting with people she met on the internet. In 2006, Joey's mother had discovered her daughter was talking to a man online who wanted her to pose as a model and film some pornography. Sherry feared Joey might be endangering her children's safety and went to discuss the matter with her daughter. They got into an argument and the police were eventually called, leading to Joey being let out of the home in handcuffs. At this point, Joey was court-ordered to undergo counseling before she could get custody of her children again. After Joey went missing, police found posts on an internet group for single mothers that she had made dating back to 2005. In the post, she said Alexis was a former drug addict and felon and that she had filed a protection order against him. However, police were unable to determine if her online activity was related to her disappearance. Authorities believe she met with foul play and is most likely deceased, but they have had no substantial leads. In 2016, she was declared legally dead at her mother's request. Her children and family still seek answers to her disappearance, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Tissa Gant was born July 6, 1970 and graduated from Titusville High School and then from Brevard Community College. At the age of 36, she would go missing on January 2, 2007. Strangely, a few days before her disappearance, Tissa filed sexual assault charges against a man named Edwin Morris after he reportedly sexually assaulted her near South D. Leon Avenue. Tissa was very nervous about filing charges because she was afraid that Morris would retaliate against her for telling the police what happened. Despite these circumstances, police initially believed that Tissa left of her own accord. Her family, on the other hand, has never believed this, and they did not believe she would voluntarily be out of touch with them. As the investigation continued, police eventually began to think that foul play was involved. In 2008, police conducted a search of Morris's property but found nothing. Her purse, which contained her belongings, would eventually be found in 2010. It was in a ditch on W.C. Stafford Street and had weeds growing through it. It was likely there from the very moment Tissa vanished and was only a half-mile from Morris's home. A subsequent search of the surrounding area turned up no other evidence. Over the years, tips would come in and there would be at least 4 different searches and digs of different areas. Also in 2008, police would search a home at 1158 De Leon Avenue as well as Morris's home. Ground-penetrating radar showed anomalies, but digging the area revealed nothing. In 2011, a home at 900 Gilbert Street, which is right around the corner from De Leon Avenue, was searched, and a week later they were at the same address again. In 2011, a vacant lot near Gilbert Street was investigated. The search was brought on by new leads in the case, but still no evidence was uncovered. Edwin Morris is currently in prison on unrelated charges and has a lengthy criminal record. Tissa's family said that they believe that more than one person knows what happened to her. On September 3, 2021, Titusville police announced they were searching the vacant lot for evidence following an anonymous tip. This is the same area that was searched during previous years, located near the home of Edwin Morris. Police have not revealed what prompted them to return to the property, nor have they revealed what, if anything, was found. The investigation is ongoing, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. This case takes us to the large market town of Solihull in the West Midlands, England. Home to around 125,000 people, one of which was 22-year-old Renee Modi. Fleeing the war zone in Syria, she had moved to England with her 2-year-old son to meet her mother Clea and stepfather Mohammed, who had been living in Solihull for 16 years. Described as intelligent and independent, she quickly became well known in her community and was always doing various things for charity and people less fortunate than herself. Her Aunt Noah said that she had a beautiful singing voice and had big dreams of releasing her own music one day. As soon as she entered the UK, she enrolled in college, and between that and raising her baby boy, there was never a dull day for Renee. Her aunt recalled how excited she was to be attending college. It was a fresh start for her and her son, and she couldn't wait for what was to come. While studying at Solihull College, she met Janbaz Taran. He too had recently moved to the UK but had actually lied about his age in order to move over. He was permitted entry into the country as a minor fleeing a war zone, declaring his age to be under 18. He was actually 21 years old. He enrolled at the same college, and as soon as he met Renee, he quickly began pressuring her to date him. Initially resistant, Renee eventually agreed, and the pair began a relationship in 2016. He would tell her, "When I saw you, I said, this is mine." Despite the relationship being turbulent from the get-go, the pair married less than a year later in an Islamic ceremony. The marriage was not recognized by UK law, and Renee's family said they begrudgingly gave their blessing. Renee's aunt said that her niece later revealed the terrifying threats that had made her agree to marry him. Janbaz told her that if she didn't marry him, he would finish her family, as well as Renee. After the wedding, Renee confided in her family that she realized she had made a big mistake, but didn't know how to get out of it. Already a possessive and controlling person, Janbaz was now becoming violent, and he quickly began appearing on the police's radar too. Renee, once so close to her family, was seeing less and less of them, and the visits people made to her flat were now few and far between. Janbaz was telling anyone that would listen that Renee was causing the issues and was mentally unstable. Even with everything going from bad to worse, Renee continued studying at college, working hard and making sure her biggest priority, her son, was getting through nursery. Soon Janbaz would be removed from the college when Renee told teachers about his real age. Renee was faced with a huge shock when she learned of his very secret life back in Afghanistan. It turned out that Janbaz had another wife who was pregnant, and they already shared 3 children. In 2017, after a long time building herself up to do it, Renee ended the relationship. Janbaz had been openly bragging about his second life with his friends, laughing at the fact that neither wife knew what was going on. Infuriated that Renee had left him, Janbaz's harassment was now totally relentless and out of control. Renee had moved in with her mom, and Janbaz took to sleeping outside her address for 12 consecutive nights, with the neighbors often chasing him away from the street. Renee told people that she felt her days were now numbered. Her family rallied around her and held a meeting with Janbaz in which he agreed to stay away from Renee. This had no impact, however. Although the police were frequently called to intervene and Renee would tell them that she felt like she was in danger, She often declined to take it any further than that. A year would pass and things would only get more dangerous for Renee. In early August 2018, with the help of her mother, Renee obtained a non-molestation order against him after Jambaz broke into Clea's home and smashed Renee's phone up. Her aunt said that Renee had finally found her strength and told the solicitor everything, from start to finish. The court injunction was filed on the 16th of August 2018. This prevented Jambaz from coming within 100 meters of her. Renee finally felt like her life was back under her control. Her hard work had paid off and she gained good results from college as well as her certificates and was excited to start looking for jobs. Renee and Cowler spent the day visiting family, shopping and ending up in a shisha lounge in the evening. Little did they know, Jambaz had been following them all day in a van he had borrowed from his workplace. After hiding and watching them for a while, he walked up to the pair and an argument broke out. He snatched Renee's phone from her and hit Clea before she hit him back. The fight continued for a while with people looking on. Jambaz was eventually escorted out of the restaurant and set off in his van. He then drove to his father's supermarket and grabbed a 12-inch steak knife. After the fight at the shisha bar, Renee called 999. She told police that despite the court order against him, Jambaz had followed her there and assaulted her and her mother. This court order, unfortunately, could not be found on the police's system. Renee said that she felt her and her mother were unsafe and that they needed help. Where should they go and what should they do? After this, Renee and Clea were also asked to leave the restaurant as well, and they waited outside on the streets for the police to arrive. Half an hour later, she phoned the police again to say she had left the shisha lounge, and she and her mother were now on the way home. Renee asked the police whether they were going to take any action and was told that they would need to see her first. While they were driving home, Jambaz returned to the shisha lounge armed with the knife and after realizing the pair had left, set off in his van looking for them. At 11:42, she made a third call asking where the officers were and that she was waiting outside of her house on North Down Road. Another call would go through. Police advised Renee to go to her mother's house, lock the doors and call if Jambaz turned up there. In a final call just after midnight, police phoned Renee to say that the officers couldn't get out that night and they would see her at 8 a.m. She expressed concern that the matter was going to be left until far too late, begging them to see her. In that moment, while the phone call was still connected, Clea started screaming as she noticed Jambaz coming out of the bushes towards them. Renee says repeatedly, "He's here. I can see him." Jambaz launched at Renee and began stabbing her in a frenzied attack. Clea jumped in to try and protect her daughter, but Jambaz turned the knife on her as well. Renee's half-sister and stepfather, Muhammad, came running out after hearing the screams, only to see the women lying on the ground and Jambaz running away. In the next few minutes, authorities poured onto the streets. There was nothing that could be done, and both Renee and Clea were pronounced dead at the scene. The head of the West Midlands Police CID described the scene as one of the most brutal and heartrending he had seen in 150 homicides and all his years on the job. Neighbors were now coming out of their homes reporting to have been woken up by the noise, with some saying they saw a man driving away in a white van. Jambaz had discarded his bloody clothes and knife before changing into a red jacket and shaving off his beard. Just a short while after attacking Renee and Clea, he was captured on CCTV in a takeaway called Pepe's on Beardwood High Street, calmly ordering some food. The only suspect police had was Jambaz Taryn, and a huge manhunt was now underway to find him. Police were using everything at their disposal to try and track him down, including a £5,000 reward, and they dramatically increased their presence around certain areas to, in their words, provide community reassurance. Jambaz's van was soon located and forensic analysis quickly began on it. Police searched several addresses linked to Jambaz seizing computer equipment and mobile phones, but he was still nowhere to be found. He would be on the run for 4 days and was now one of Britain's most wanted criminals. Soon, a member of the public saw him and tipped off the police. Officers detained him in an alleyway using pepper spray and finally, they had Jambaz in handcuffs. The amount of phone calls Renee had made to the police that night was concerning to the public, and people wanted answers as to why no one came out. The police said they had done their absolute best. On the 8th of September 2018, Renee and Clea were laid to rest in a joint service attended by hundreds. Following brief submissions by prosecutors Annabelle Darlow QC and Jody Anderson, Judge Paul Farah QC told Jambaz, "You will be back here before the court on October 30th for a plea and trial preparation hearing. Your trial has been fixed for March 4th next year." But in December 2018, Jambaz appeared at Birmingham Crown Courts. He pleaded guilty to both murders. The judge described the murders as significantly premeditated and sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years that he must serve before he can even be considered for parole. The Independent Office on Police Conduct started an investigation into the actions of the West Midlands Police on that night, after the police referred themselves to them. Muhammad Salim said his wife was a wonderful woman who worked hard to make the home a welcoming, happy place filled with love and good memories. Renee Modi came to England looking for a better life for her and her baby boy. She was met with an awful end after fighting for her freedom and life for so long. Nor said of her niece, just by looking at her, people forget their bad day. She was always smiling, full of life and socializing. Nor now cares for her son and talks to him about Renee all the time. She is determined to not let her niece and sister's death be in vain and works hard to raise awareness for domestic violence and abusive and coercive relationships. Clea Denise Hall was born March 30th, 1976 and went by Clea. She got along well with her family and was ranked as the top student in her graduating high school class. In fact, she had never even stayed out late without permission from her parents. She loved children and sometimes worked in the nursery at her local church. In 1994, she was just 2 weeks away from graduating with honors at Watson Chapel High School in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and was looking forward to getting the commencement address at her graduation ceremony. She had a summer internship lined up in Boston, and that fall she would have been heading off to Tennessee State University's pre-med program, where she would pursue her dream of becoming a pediatrician. But that all changed on the evening of May 9, 1994. Clea had an after-school job doing clerical work at the home office of Dr. Larry Amos at 5309 Fawcett Road in Pine Bluff until 8:30 p.m. Dr. Amos was a 43-year-old executive director of Arkansas Federal Child Care Nutrition and Educational Services. As usual, once Clea was done helping him out around his office, which was located above the garage, she would call home and have one of her parents come pick her up, which was only a few blocks away. On May 9th, Clea was dropped off at work by her mother, L'Oreal Hall, just before 5 p.m. and asked if she would be picking her up from work as usual, and she said yes. Clea called home at 8 p.m. and asked her mother if she had any phone messages, which she didn't. She then told her mother that she would be working a little past 8:30 p.m., which was when her shift usually ended, and that she would call her when she was done. After the conversation, her mother fell asleep. When she woke up just before 1 a.m., she realized her daughter had never called for her to pick her up. Laryl then quickly called Dr. Amos. He said that Clea clocked out at 8:30 p.m. and was picked up by someone but did not see who was driving and couldn't give a description of the vehicle. However, no one else had been scheduled to pick her up, and Clea told a coworker she would be walking home, something she didn't ordinarily do. Once Laurel was awake and her daughter was not home, she stayed up the rest of the night worrying. By morning, when she hadn't shown up, her parents thought she might at least go to school that day because they felt she would never miss that. Her younger brother headed to Watson Chapel, but sadly she was nowhere to be found. At this point, her parents called the police to report her missing, but were told since she was 18, they would have to wait at least 24 hours. Her parents spent the rest of the day exhausting their resources looking for her, and by 5 p.m., they had waited long enough and drove to the Pine Bluff police station and reported her missing. Clea did not have her purse, identification, extra clothes, or any money on her when she vanished. Clea's family hung up flyers around town and contacted the news, while police eventually searched the area, including Dr. Amos's office, but found no clues that could point to her whereabouts. Police also searched her boyfriend's car and home, but found no clues. He took a polygraph test and the results were inconclusive. Dr. Amos was questioned, but refused to take the polygraph test. Dr. Amos described Clea as a very sharp, very efficient person that he, his wife, and 3-year-old son had grown fond of. Some people say that he had an infatuation with Clea. After Clea was reported missing, a lot of suspicion began to surround Dr. Amos. Not only was he the last person to see Clea alive, he left town for 2 days on an alleged business trip to Dallas and was not formally questioned by police until May 13th. Reports say that he was uncooperative with police, hired a lawyer, and refused to speak to her family after a week. He also remodeled his home multiple times after she disappeared. Amos initially claimed that he never actually saw Clea leave and only heard the garage door closing, followed by the sound of her climbing into a vehicle. But Amos then changed his story and claimed he saw Clea looking out the window for her ride before exiting the house once the vehicle arrived. A few weeks before her disappearance, a male friend of Clea's had dropped her off for work, but was met with a hostile reaction from Amos. He said, "You know, I don't allow courting on my property." Clea then told him that he was not her boyfriend. Clea's father, along with many others, would also allegedly witness him tearing down some of her missing persons flyers. 18 years later, in 2012, the Find Our Missing TV show profiled Clea's story, which prompted a fresh investigation into the case. 2 witnesses came forward who claimed they did renovations on Amos' home shortly after Clea went missing. One of them recalled seeing traces of blood on some insulation, while the other remembered smelling a terrible odor while filling a hole in the backyard with cement. Police executed a search warrant to search Amos' home and recovered 4 pieces of evidence. A crime scene technician packaged up the evidence and took it to the local police department. The evidence was forgotten about for over a month, but was eventually sent off to the state crime lab for forensic testing. However, all of it came back negative for blood. It's been almost 28 years since Clea disappeared and her dreams were snuffed out. And as of today, this case remains unsolved. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.